All right. Welcome to the Wisteria Cottage. I am your hostess, Nadeshiko Gatsby, and we will be reading Side Quest. This is by one of my favorite authors, Stephanie K. Clemens. I was first acquainted with them. It was through a cottage core, dark cottage core advanced reader copy event. I was part of this ARC reading team, and I first read her book Monday Mornings and Enchanted Evenings. It was my favorite from the set because it was like this Victorian interpretation of Midsummer's Night Dream meets the 12 Dancing Princesses, and it was just a fun, like cozy, like cottagecore romance book that I read. I might read that one of these days. It is one of my favorite cottagecore thematic books. And with that said, I'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and start with Side Quest. This is Stephanie K. Clemens' LitRPG. It is quite romantic, and we'll go ahead and just give it a start. So, I like supporting indie authors. I love to support authors who support me, and Stephanie has been very supportive in my author journey. And it's just our way, just kind of giving back to all the indie authors that we love. So whether you're listening to this on YouTube or if you have some headphones on and you're on a audio walk, oh, we have Comey. Welcome to the chat, Comey. Welcome to the college, and we're just about to get started in reading Side Quest. So yeah, let's get into some lit RPG. Go ahead and just turn the page in this. I actually got the special edition of this book, and it has like the sprayed edges. So the sprayed edges on this just have like daggers. It's like forest green, and also I believe this version of the book also has like a colored map of where we're going. I should probably do that when I create my lit RPG. I'll probably just like get like a piece of paper, like this is what I want, and just probably have my friends just kind of figure it out. In terms of like, this is what I want my RPG world to look like. Okay. Chapter 1. The Thorn and the Throne. All great quests begin with a blade, a secret, and the deeply incorrect assumption that nothing will go wrong. Have you come to hear a tale of adventure, daring, and perhaps love? If that's the case, you're in luck. I've just got the story, heroism, hijinks, and heartbreak in equal measure. Now, how shall I begin? Let's try something traditional this time. Once upon a time, a deadly assassin was hired to kill a tyrant king. She would have done it too, swiftly, silently, without an ounce of fuss, if the universe hadn't conspired to throw 15 goats, 3 haunted taverns, 1 chatty mage, and precisely 1 cursed chicken in her way. Honestly, she deserved better. Kaylin Thorne was sitting in her favorite overstuffed chair, boots off, feet up, glass of cold foamy ale on the table beside her, reading. Yes, you heard that right, reading. It was one of her favorite things to do when she wasn't on a mission. Looks like we have someone here. Yeah, I'm gonna read and run. I'm gonna take care of myself. Yeah, go take care of yourself, Comey. Have a good night. There was something about escaping into a world of heroes and damsels filled with yearning and romance that made her happy. Not that she would ever admit it. In fact, Kaylin read about love the way some people studied battlefield strategy, objectively and with the underlying suspicion that it might get her killed. Despite that tendency, it was how she relaxed. Pounding on the door dared to interrupt the cozy atmosphere she created for herself. A warm fire cackling in the stone fireplace she built herself years ago. A worn-out quilt thrown halfway to the side of her covering very little of her, but there if she decided she needed it. Her dog, Timber, curled up just below her feet. Timber looked like a cross between a wolf and a raccoon, one with one blue eye and one hazel. When she arrived on Kaylin's doorstep a year ago, it was a competition over who was most feral. Kaylin proved it was within a week. Timber respected that, hence the loyalty. But neither here nor there. Let's get back to the story, shall we? Where was I? Oh, yeah, pounding. Kaylin sighed, carefully folding over the corner of the last page she read before closing her book, setting it down and standing. She made her way to the door, intending to open it with an envelope slid underneath. Not another mission, she muttered to herself. Or maybe timber. It was difficult to tell in situations like this before picking up the envelope. She turned the rough paper over in her hand, knowing the crimson wax seal of the Shadow Guild before sliding her dagger named Mercy, if anyone's interested, under the flap and slicing it open. Dear Thorn, off to a great start. Or should I call you Thorn of the North? Absolutely not. Who told him that? I will find them. A new, shall we say, situation has arisen. It needs your particular skill to be remedied. He says situation like it's a kitchen spill, not regicide. King Varric of Eldreach had become a tyrant, and that's putting it nicely, and he needs you to be removed from power. Oh god, good. A king. Because the last 3 times went so smoothly. You've proven time and again you can handle matters such as this, as difficult as they are. Translation, I don't know how you survive, but I'd like to take credit for it. If you succeed in fixing our little problem, there is a substantial reward. Let's just say never working again would be an option. Bold of him to assume I'd stop working, or he has that kind of money. Meet me at the Last Wish tomorrow at dusk to accept a job and receive further information. Because nothing says classified assassination contract like a tavern that smells like old blood and bad decisions. Dangerously yours. He did not. Professor M. Mortimer. He did. He actually signed it that way. I need a drink. Kaylin rolled her eyes at the end of the letter, as she should have. Who signs a letter dangerously yours? Professor Mundus Mortimer hadn't been in the field for at least 10 years, and he definitely wasn't spending any time keeping his skills intact. He might be the main recruiter for the Shadow Guild, but he wasn't a threat to anyone anymore. Hey, welcome. We're just reading a book here. Enjoy the LitRPG. After reading the missive a second time and committing to memory, Kaylin threw her parchment into the fire and watched it curl, then blacken as it turned to ash. She curled back into the chair and picked up her. Before I move on to the meeting tomorrow, perhaps I should tell you a little bit more about our protagonist. Kaylin Thorne had 26 confirmed skills. A dagger collection named after extinct flowers, and the emotional availability of a scorched cabbage. This, of course, made her widely popular in the assassin guilds and completely incapable of handling sincere compliments. 15 years ago, when it all started, Kaylin, a rowdy 15-year-old girl with black hair and eyes and so blue they look like violet in a certain light, attempted to pickpocket the wrong person. She would have known better if she had any sense of self-preservation, but after a tragic loss of her parents, the destruction of the orphanage she was placed in, and the last family she lived with forced her into, she felt pretty invincible. I mean, she'd proven she was a survivor, or at least that's what she thought. Until she cut the purse strings of the Dame Antwin Stride, otherwise known as the Harrow Mistress of the Inner Circle. It was true that Kaylin was caught up in her attempt to relieve Dame Stride of her precious belongings. It is also true that she was not caught until the gods were in her hands, having successfully removed them from Dame Stride's person. Most individuals who knew Dame Anwin Stride would consider Kaylin's theft a success. Kaylin did not. It did, however, change the course of her life. It was the reason why at 30 our protagonist had 26 confirmed kills, a permanent scowl, and trust issues deeper than the Rabin Straits, which, as of now, no one has ever seen the bottom of. To call the Last Wish a tavern was generous. Words like den of iniquity, reckoning of the soulless, or place livers go to die would be far more accurate. The only individuals who chose to enter its held filth-encrusted walls were bloodthirsty brigands and heavily armed assassins, which was why Kalen never chose it as its meeting place. Not to mention it reeked inside. Outside. Possibly in another dimension. Like the smell of evil rot had permeated the wood, the stones, the very soul of the place. It wafted into the surrounding block like a sentient warning sign for anyone with standards. Or maybe its goal was to turn the entire area into attraction for any and all hedonistic and criminal activities. Which was why Kaylin was still standing outside the door, face covered to protect her nostrils and from the scent of stale beer, dried blood, and broken dreams. No, I don't know what broken dreams smell like, but it sounded good, didn't it? With a sigh and a roll of her shoulders, she pushed the door open and entered the dark, smoke-drenched room. She nearly gagged. She let her eyes adjust before moving farther into the tavern. Criminals drank and laughed and argued like they were normal, law-abiding citizens. They weren't. No one who entered the last wish followed rules. Kaylin found a table in the corner, back to the wall always. It was old rule of hers. Born from nearly dying twice in 1 week over a decade ago, you couldn't watch everyone if you were in the middle of a room. Since Mortimer wasn't there yet, of course he wasn't, she claimed the table for herself. Leave it to the recruiter to set a meeting time and be late for it. Just another way he illustrated how important he believed himself to be. The door opened again. Light streamed into the room like it was trying to rescue someone, and in walked Professor Mundus Mortimer, round glasses reflecting the last of the day, wispy white hair ruffled like he lost a duel with humidity, and a cloak so melodramatic it belonged in a theater troupe. Because, of course, he wore a cloak. The man took cloak and dagger a bit too literally, but at least he was here, and only marginally late. Ah, Thorn, a pleasure to see you again. He dragged a chair across the sticky floor, the legs screeching like tortured banshees. The entire tavern glanced over them once and returned to their legally questionable business. Kaylin leaned forward. She wanted the details, the mission, the pay, the dangers the guild would bother to tell her about. If they told Mortimer anything at all, which was all doubtful, but even now, Kaylin sometimes forgot that hope was a waste of energy, and she was better off without it. She locked eyes with him and waited. Mortimer blinked, smiled, waited back. She said nothing. He waited, then waited some more, clearly expecting her to speak, but she wasn't one to extend pleasantries to anyone, much less of the pompous food sitting in front of her. You could call it rude, but she wouldn't care. Mortimer cleared his throat. Well then, we might as well get started, he paused. She arched her eyebrow, a threat in micro-expression form. King Varric is not the kind king he was expected to be, Mortimer said, each word enunciated as if he feared she wouldn't understand speech. At the very least, he is a tyrant, at worst an evil despot. The guild has decided it's time to do something about it. Kaylin did not blink. If Mortimer knew what she was thinking or how many ways she knew to silence pompous men, he wouldn't be sitting across from her so comfortably. But Mortimer didn't know. Mortimer never knew. He couldn't even dispose a half-dead informant without backup. Kaylin, however, well, there was still one incident in Saltmere. Let's just say the town no longer held festivals. Continue, Kaylin said, casually picking her teeth with mercy. A dagger, not a metaphor, though it might as well be. What you don't know is that mercy was the only blade Kaylin had never used to kill anyone. A line in the sand drew a long time ago. A shame, really, that no one tells you the tide always comes. Mortimer took off his glasses and polished them with his sleeve. There's concern, he said, that the king is, well, he's gone. A bit, you know. Are you trying to say he's mentally unwell? Kaylin asked flatly. He nodded, his wispy curls fluttering with every move. Yes, that's it. Anyway, it's become a problem and he needs disposing of. And the Hollow Mistress insisted that you do it. For a generous sum, of course. Kaylin's expression didn't change, but when Mortimer spoke the number, her knuckles went still. It was a very large number. Years of training meant Kaylin Thorne didn't betray emotions easily. She didn't twitch, didn't flinch, didn't let her hope breathe. But her brain, Trader's thing that whispered, that would be enough. Enough to stop running, enough to buy land, enough to open. No, absolutely not. Kaylin Thorne didn't dream. She most certainly did not dream about a quiet little bookshop and a tea house with loose leaf brews and shelves full of tragic romances. She had never told anyone. She refused to tell herself. And yet, she met Mortimer's gaze again. Flat, cold, assassin like. Fine, she said. Chapter 2. A goat, a god, and a bad decision. Some side quests you choose. Others come with horns and a vengeance gink. 3 days. Kaylin had left the last wish 3 days ago, and everything had already turned into shambles. After packing, she'd left Timber a side of venison, knowing full well the dog, questionable species, status pending, could take care of herself if the mission ran long. Still, Timber had grown soft of this past year, domesticated. If Kaylin was being dramatic, and Kaylin worried she wouldn't last long on her own. Not that her assassin would ever admit she cared about the animal's well-being. She can tie herself all she wants. We know better. Never mind her mentor taught her affection was weakness, especially when it comes to fur and trust issues. Kaylin had definitely developed a fondness for Timber. To stay out of sight and therefore out of mind, Kaylin made camp first night she shouldn't have. The great winds of the Anderboak arrived uninvited, tore through the clearing like a bored storm god with something to prove, and a single rogue spark from her fire found the canvas of her tent. The tent burned. So did her camp roll, her pack, all her clothes, all her food, including the hard cheese. She hadn't packed much. There were towns along the way, but still, losing a wedge of hard cheese to flames felt particularly cruel. So instead of weeping like a normal person, she walked through the night with soot in her hair and murder in her heart. At a stream, she stopped just long enough to refill her water flask and contemplate her life choices, which was when the sky opened up in a deluge of rain, because of course it did. Lightning struck her coin purse. Yes, her coin purse. All her gold, silver, and copper fused in one gloriously useless nugget of melted metal, a shimmering lump of failure. To say our assassin was having a hard time would be an understatement. A more accurate description might involve the words cosmically hexed. This is what happens when you laugh at fate. It laughs back with lightning. She stumbled into the small town that probably had a name. Not that Kaylin had bothered to learn it. It smelled like onions. The mayor had sideburns shaped like a question mark. Those were her only takeaways. Unable to pay for a room at the inn, Kaylin did what any resourceful, sleep-deprived assassin would do. She broke into the stable and slept in the loft with the hay. Unfortunately, the stable had woke up at dawn, opened up the loft hatch, and Kaylin fell through the sack like a sack of vengeful potatoes, right next to a startled horse. The horse bolted. The stable hand screamed. Kaylin was immediately accused of horse theft. She half snuck, half ran out of town before the local law could grab her boots. The only bright side, the horse didn't go very far. At least, she reasoned, since she was already branded a thief. Might as well make it worth her while, Kaylin said to herself. She was, after all, morally gray and marginally hungry. Now was the morning of the 3rd day. She rode her ill-gotten steed into the cheery little town of Raven's Hollow, a place so wholesome-looking it mismatched her mood. like her ex used to mismatch her socks. Her goals? Finding a mage eccentric enough to unglob her coins, trade said unglob metal for food and supplies. Finally, get back to the actual mission, assassinate the king. You know, that tiny little quest she was supposed to be on? Little as Kaylin knows, she has two goats, one demigod away from forgetting she's an assassin entirely. And we're only on chapter 2. It needs to be said, not everything is a trial for Kaylin. She found her mage without any problems. It was exactly where someone had said he'd be, for once. And not only he separated her unfortunate glob of coin metal, he even allocated the results into the neat little chunks of the original denomination. A miracle. She almost said thank you. Almost. Unfortunately, that was the only thing that went smoothly. The market was a bustling center of capitalism, chaos, and far too much shouting. Yes, it was. It had what she needed, but every merchant wanted to haggle. And Caitlin was in no mood to play that game. She scowled, they raised prices. She scowled harder. They smiled and raised them more. This is what happens when you try to intimidate people making a living selling fake wands and candied rat tails. Eventually, the stalemate broke. She danced back and forth, bartering ballet. She danced back and forth, bartering ballet, and kept mostly within budget, and crossed every item off the list. Almost. The closures on her new packs needed sewing, so she was stuck in the town waiting for the final bits to be finished, with nothing to do but sit and wait, and avoid thinking about a little bookshop that didn't exist yet. And that's when she heard it. A child. Crying. Her body tense on instinct. Fight or flight. Definitely flight. Preferably through a wall, but the child saw her. Big red eyes, tear-streaked cheeks. He waved. She could still run. But what kind of monster turns her back on a crying child? Spoiler, not our assassin. Not today. Kaylin sighed, shoulders already slumping in defeat. She weaved through the milking townsfolk, none of whom seemed to notice the boy, like they'd trained their eyes to slide past small, sad things. When she reached him, she crouched low and asked with exactly zero ceremony, "Why are you crying?" The boy hiccuped. "My goat, Marzipan, is missing. I looked everywhere for her." Yes, this was the first two goats that Kaylin questioned all her life choices. The second had a better aim. Kaylin blinked. "What's your name? Where are your parents? Maybe we can get them to help you find your goat." Totally reasonable suggestion, completely ignored. "Thimble. And my parents are gone. There's no one to help me." There it was, a tiny tug at the last heartstring Kaylin hadn't burned through. Damn it. "Maybe I could help you find your goat," she said, already regretting the words. Thimble's whole face lit up like a sunrise. "Really? You'll help me save Marzipan?" Kaylin sighed again, this time with more soul. "Yeah," she muttered. I'll help you find your goat." And so the saga of Marzipan the goat, Kaylin the reluctant, and the terrible, terrible decision to care. She left Thimble in the town under the care of the shopkeepers. It cost her more coin, which was regrettable, but adventures like these were no place for a small child. You know, when a goblin would jump off a cavern and demand you shoes, which left Cam alone. Exactly how she liked it. Following goat tracks into mists that did not look natural. Honestly, that's never a good sign. As soon as she entered the mist, things started to happen or stop happening depending how you looked at it. Give me 1 second here. Okay, sorry about that. Birds chirping. In the forest, surrounded by trees, nary a bird chirp. Those same trees seemed like breathing. Kaylin tripped over a root and reached out to stabilize herself. The bark pulsed beneath her palm. It felt wrong. Like the tree was inhaling and exhaling, or digesting. She quickly removed her hand, not wanting to become its next meal. It's completely unnecessary to mention that the trail looped around itself, bringing Kaylin back to the beginning not once, not twice, not even 3 times. By the 4th lap around this mystical woodland's death maze, Kaylin was ready to stab geometry. Instead, she found the path that led deeper into the forest. The path appeared in front of her was a more accurate description, but I thought I'd be nice and let her take the credit this time. The trees were lucky she never took out any anger on nature, no matter how stabby she was feeling. None of these things caused her to question this little side quest any more than she already was, but when the trees started whispering her name, she muttered profanities, fluently in 3 different languages, before she continued deep into the forest. It wasn't long after the whispers started and she reached a clearing with stone ruins, and yes, Marzipan standing proudly on a moss-covered altar, chewing on vines like she owned the place. "Come here, Marzipan," Kaylin called. "It's time to go home to Thimble. That kid really misses you." The goat stared at her and continued its chewing. "Damn it, you! Bleep, bleepity bleep! From the underworld! Get your ass down here! You don't want to find out what happens if I drag you out of here." Kaylin's short fuse was burnt to a crisp. She wanted cheese, a soft bed, and to be done with this distraction. And don't we all? Except maybe the goat. She seemed deeply connected to her aesthetic. Of course, Kaylin rarely got what she wanted. A loud pop echoed through the forest. The ground beneath the stone ruins cracked open. An ancient spirit, Alron of the Hollow, a demigod of thresholds, guardianship, and occasionally revenge, emerged. He was part stag, part stormcloud, and very annoyed at being awakened by a goat. "Who dare disturbs the sanctum of Alron the Hollow?" the ancient spirit bellowed, paused. "Is that goat eating my altar?" he asked, quieter in his tone quizzical. "You got to be kidding me," were Kaylin's exact words as she witnessed the spectacle in front of her. Alron stared at the goat in disbelief. How could it be standing there, calmly munching on his altar? A goat does what a goat wants to do. There's no question about it. There was no time for this nonsense, so Kaylin did what any unreasonably impatient person would do when faced with a stubborn goat and the demigod that was pondering its existence. She opened her mouth, and when she should have kept it closed. "I'll just take the goat and be on my way." She sauntered up to the goat, her mind racing as she tried to decide how she was going to convince Marzipan to listen to her. Alron's eyes left the goat and focused on her. "Who dares to disturb my slumber?" Technically it was Marzipan, but goats don't give a bleep about demigods. Alron was very much aware of this fact. Kaylin looked to her right, then to her left. If the demigod was going to blame the goat, she was the only being around to blame. "Your trespass," he pointed a finger at her, "has disturbed my eternal slumber. Therefore, you must pay. I demand an offering of blood or bond." Marzipan bleated. It was clear she refused to be a part of any offering. Kaylin tried diplomacy first. It wasn't her strongest of skills, but when saving a goat for her child, it seemed like the appropriate choice. "Elron, can I call you Elron?" she started. Take her time as she determined what she could negotiate with. "Why don't we sit down, chat, and strike a deal? There's no need for blood or bonding. I'm here to save a child's goat." The look she tossed Marzipan would have frozen a lesser man, but Marzipan didn't care one iota. After all, she was a female goat. "No!" Elrond thundered. Kaelin did her best not to roll her eyes. She failed to hide her annoyance. I'm sure there's something you want. Maybe something you want disposed of. She took a beat to ponder her next words. Let me guess. Someone stole your crown, slept on your moss, looked at you in the wrong during a thunderstorm. I take jobs like this all the time. Tell me who, and I'll take care after I return the goat. She didn't need another mission, but when one negotiates with a demigod, it's best not to hold things back. No. Now you're being unreasonable, said with that tone that really should triggered smiting. Marzipan bleated in agreement. I could just take the goat. It's not like you'd give me too much trouble. Her snark was set on offensive with a side of let's piss him off. It wasn't a wise decision, but when diplomacy failed Kaelin, as it always did, her next tactic was always sarcasm and snarkiness, because angering the being that had what you wanted wasn't always a good idea. I'm also proficient in this sarcasm. What did you say? Elrond bellowed, shaking leaves off the trees with his blooming incredulity. Oh, nothing. Just that I could leave here with this goat, and that there's nothing you can do about it. She turned to leave as soon as she saw Marzipan take a step towards her. Elrond galloped until he stood in front of her, blocking her exit. When she tried to take another route, he was in front of her in the blink of an eye, preventing her once again from leaving. Not so easy to get past me, he chuckled. Kaelin sighed. I didn't want you to do this, but you've given me no choice. This was when she turned to the most successful tactic getting what she wanted. Violence. I'm not gonna lie to you, the battle was epic. Really one for the ages. It was a kind of fight bards exaggerate and scholars pretend didn't happen. There were lawsuits. Kaelin threw daggers, specifically Moonveil and Whisperton, two of her favorite daggers, both very sharp and very pointy. She circled Elrond, waiting and watching for the exact moment she should make her move. Elrond struck first, sending lightning arcing through the trees, followed by throwing the moss-covered stones faster than Kaelin had ever seen stones thrown. They rained down on her, one after another. It would have broken her spirit, but the moss covering softened their impact. Lightning acred, moss flew, and somewhere a tree wept. There was a pause in the chaos. It was less than a second, but she countered with some impressive knife work, managing to draw blood from several unimportant places. There was a lucky roll where she managed to escape a lightning arc. The ground was truly signed right where she had been standing. Kaelin deflected a vine whip with Moonveil, cursed herself for wearing non-slip boots when she didn't glide across the grass like she planned, causing her sweat with Whisperthorn to miss the mark. And then, out of the blue, a creature, one that looked vaguely familiar, leapt in, snarled at the demigod, distracting him with long enough for Kaelin to regain her footing before disappearing. None of it was enough, and it looked like Kaelin wasn't going to survive. Elrond raised his hand to smite her, where Marzipan charged demigod, headbutting him just at the right moment. Begrudgingly impressed by the fact the goat involved itself, Elrond hated the fight. Instead of fighting to death, I've decided to let the Hollow's ancient tree decide your fate. Elrond proclaimed while standing with his hands on his hips, assured his own importance. Kaelin was not convinced, even more annoyed and angry, that this was going to take even longer than planned. This rite involves three tests of guardianship. Elrond projected his voice as if there was an audience to impress instead of just Kaelin and the goat. If you succeed, that you and that goat, the demigod thrust his chin towards Marzipan, shall walk free. If you fail, your soul will be bound here. You will become the Hollow's next guardian. Why the demigod would want a failure of a guardian to protect the Hollows beyond me. Kaelin and the goat, but those were his rules. She looked at the sky. I should have left the damn goat. Since this baffling creature is so important to you, Protect it, he clapped. The forest filled with sticky fog, and the second time on her journey the sky opened up. Thunder cracked, and water pelted her. Luckily for her and our story, Kaylin was a quick thinker. She whipped her belt off and wrapped it around Marzipan's neck seconds before the goat attempted to bolt. Leather ripped through her hand, and a searing pain brought tears to her eyes. But she held on. Trees shifted through the mist, creating a maze of trails impossible to navigate on a sunny day. But during a thunderstorm in a fog that clung to you, it was worse than impossible. Whatever that word was, I apologize. It seems to escape me. But Kaylin didn't believe in impossible tasks. She weaved her way through the maze, dragging the damn goat behind her every step of the way, all while ensuring it wasn't struck by lightning. Eventually, the storm stopped and the fog cleared, leaving them standing in the clearing in front of Elrond. That was supposed to be a challenge, but you not only made it through, the two of you are unscathed. He stroked the point of his goatee. The next test requires more than just perseverance. A stone sentinel appeared in front of Kaylin, who stood there dripping water, staring at Elrond with a murder in her eyes. You must answer the sentinel's riddle or... Kaylin interrupted. Yeah, he already said that. Can we get this whole thing over with? Can we just get on with this whole right thing? I have better things to do with my time. Aghast, Elrond raised his brows. Fine, your riddle awaits. The stone sentinel began to spout his riddle, but Kaelin swiped the whistle thorn across the sentinel's neck, then punched him in the face, sending the stone head rolling across the clearing. Whisperthorn was the perfect dagger to use in this particular instance because a now extinct flower it was named after helped people hear things never said. The answer is a shadow, she said, her glare stronger than ever. Elrond glared right back. I should disqualify you from cheating. Is my answer correct? She raised an eyebrow. You see, whenever there's a test and riddle, everyone's always just used the same one. It would have been amusing if it weren't so foolish. You know it is, he grumbled. The last test is a memory of your guardianship. Her eyes burned as memory infiltrated her mind. She almost resigned herself to becoming the Hollow's guardian. It had to be better than dredging up old memories. You want my story time? Is that really my last test? Her tone made it sound as if it would be easy, but the last thing Kaylin wanted to do was relive one of the many events in her life that caused her emotions better protected than a dragon's hoard. Oh, excuse me. Elrond rubbed his hands. You could just accept the consequences of failing and give me your soul. I rather not. Kaylin took a deep breath. Short and sweet, that was the way to go. I was on a mission about 10 years ago, and it went terribly wrong. My fellow assassin was caught in a crossfire of a crossbow battle. She was hit. I entered a fray, basically weaponless. She brought a knife to a crossbow fight and dragged her body back to safely. She lived long enough to thank me for my kindness, but not long enough to see what I did to the individuals that hurt her. She pushed her hair out of her eyes. It definitely wasn't tears she was wiping away. We all know that the Thorn of the North would never be seen crying. He cleared her throat and declared Kaylin the Hollow's chosen, guardian of thresholds, speaker of silent vows, she who keeps the lost, watcher of goats, accidentally divine, wielder of mild inconvenience, before disappearing into a swirl of mist and stag antlers, leaving behind a map. Without thinking about it, Kaylin picked up the map and muttered, That better not be a title I have to put down on paperwork. Marzipan nuzzled her as the moss glowed with golden light. Vines uncurled like waking snakes, and pale blossoms bloomed between Marzipan's hooves. Kaylin returned the goat to Thimble, waving away words of gratitude. The villagers whispered as she got the hell out of town. A woman threw a garland of turnips at her feet. A man tried to hand her a baby. She did not make eye contact. It wasn't until she was well on the road she realized she had forgotten to pick up the cheese she'd purchased. Okay, I will take a quick break, just grab some cream soda, and we will be on to the next chapter. My goal is to perhaps maybe get to 3 to 4 chapters each day. And yeah, let's go ahead and take a break right now. All right, we're back to side quest. So let's over to our next chapter. Chapter 3. Spellbinding is not consent. Magical contracts are like tattoos. Permanent, usually regretted, and often acquired during moments of panic. Hey, welcome. Nice to have you here, Professor Ramses. You were joining us for our Lit RPG read of side quests, and you just entered into chapter 3. So far, I'm really enjoying this book. It just seems like every chapter is a different side quest. So let's read this chapter about spellbinding. Still muddy, tired, and tragically cheeseless, Kaylin was well outside the town's limits of Raven's Hollow and back on track to finish her original guild assignment. As she rode atop the stone horse, she vowed not to be derailed by another side quest. Kaylin should have known better than to make a vow that promised anything. A vow that was one thing that would cause everything to go wrong. There was no time for shenanigans. And yet she was neck deep in goat related detours. The Shadow Guild liked to send multiple assassins to a job when one would just do. They thought competition brought out the best in everyone they employed. Little did they know, it just caused a dip in morale every time one of the assassins found out they weren't the only one hired for the job. And here she was set on finishing the job, and she let herself get waylaid by a goat. What was wrong with her? Letting a watery-eyed kid reroute her entirely deadly agenda? Kaylin liked to act like she was surprised every time she went off to save someone. Let's just say she was the only one that was shackled by her actions. The horse's ears perked, twisting towards to sound off to the left. Was that a human scream? She should ignore it. She didn't need another distraction. Another scream pierced the air. Birds flew out of a nearby bush, disturbed by the calamitous wailing. At least I assume that's why they left. Birds aren't known for thinking things through. Damn it, she cursed, directing the horse towards the sound of suffering. There was something wrong with Kaylin. It's called the conscience. Highly inconvenient for assassins. Crashing to the trees with a dramatic aplomb, she found herself staring at a youngish man. He was definitely somewhere between the ages of 29 and 100, dressed in the most flamboyant mage robes that have ever assaulted her eyes. Really, why do people insist on standing out when it's so much more useful to blend into the shadows? Yes, she knows the robes first. It took a moment before she actually saw why the man was screaming. The mage was being held by his neck by a vine, apparently a sentient one with a grudge. Oh God, oh thank the gods, so and help me! The man's eyes were pleading while his hands were the only thing keeping the plant from finishing him off. Kaylin contemplated her life at this point. She should just turn around and leave. Anyone being strangled by a vine probably did something to deserve it. Vines weren't known for their tempers. She pulled the reins of her stolen horse. Another side quest wasn't on her schedule for today. Please, if you leave, I'll be soul-bound to a vine demon with commitment issues. The man begged, his magenta and lime green robe swirled around his feet. I swear there's a perfectly good reason why I'm in this predicament. The horse turned back. Not Kaylin, but the horse. She sighed. It appeared she was going to have to save the mage. Looking around, figuring out the best approach, she noticed a scroll. Was that romantic binding and was that romantic binding language in ancient Arcanum? I can assure you, not only was ancient Arcanum, it was also a soul binding spell. The mage was definitely the cause of his current situation. Damn it, you did this, didn't you? She half yelled, half muttered, already knowing the answer. Taking a step forward, she brandished a moon veil in an attempt to get the vine to let go of the man's neck. Of course, it was futile, and she had the dagger to cut him free. Thankfully, her swiping action somehow banished the last of the magical effects. When someone says love hurts, they definitely mean it. Just look what happened to the poor vine. It slithered off to go nurse its wounds and maybe propagate. Kaylin watched until she was sure the danger was over. The mage took a knee and bowed his head. He looked up, and words Kaylin never wanted to hear left his mouth. You saved me. That means we're fate-bound companions now. No! She walked backwards away from him. Absolutely not. Whatever spell you cast, undo it now. Stomping around the small clearing, Kaelin muttered every single spell that had been an inkling of being able to break the bond. Unfortunately, she really sucked at magic. It never ended in a catastrophe. It just never really worked. It was a kind of like it's kind of like baking. Even if you have all the right ingredients, things just go wrong. She turned to the mage. Fix this, or I'm going to use my least favorite dagger on you. Kaelin didn't have a favorite or a least favorite. She loved all her daggers equally. However, the mage didn't know that. He scrambled to undo the spell. Instead, lightning would have struck him had Kaelin not shoved him out of the way. She really needed to make up her mind. If she let the lightning strike him, the spell might have been broken, assuming he didn't survive, with a risk, which was a risk she almost was willing to accept. Then there was a gray cloud that hovered over her, and she wouldn't leave her alone. She got an unexpected shower when she poked it with mercy. The mage was about to try again. Out of nowhere, a howl reverberated through the woods. A howl Kaelin recognized made the no longer strangled mage nearly jump off his ropes and sent the horse rearing like it had just seen a tax collector and was ready to bolt into the next kingdom. She grabbed the horse's reins before his hooves hit the ground, glaring at the mage with daggers in his eyes. Not literal ones, in case if you're confused. The cursed animal and curse her animal companion. I left you an entire side of venison and told you to stay home. Her exasperation was visible in every inch of her body. Timber loped into view, looking like a majestic feral gremlin. If you ignored her tongue hanging out the side of her mouth, or maybe the tongue that was really brought home her vibe. She approached Kaelin, sat in front of her, and offered a paw while staring at the assassin down with a stereotypical wolf dog stare. Oh my, she's magnificent, the mage stared at Timber, his eyes glowing with shock and admiration. Does she accept bribes? I have some dried mangoes. Dogs always know where the story's going. That's why they show up right before it gets worse, with smug paws and excellent timing. Don't cast another spell. Kaelin stood there, dripping wet, eyes darting between the mage and her dog, unsure what to do with either of them. But you said... Kaelin rolled her eyes. I know what I said, but if you continue, one of us is going to die. And I don't want it to be me or my dog. She didn't want to, but she reached down and petted Timber. The lolling tongue was too much to resist. And no, she does not accept bribes, especially not mangoes, no matter what she tells herself. Kaelin crossed her arms. It was meant to look tough. It almost succeeded. The dog rolling on its back at Kaelin's feet wasn't really helping with the image. Well then, if I'm along for the journey, I might as well introduce myself. He held out his hand. Kaelin stared at it. She didn't shake it, she didn't move, she just stared. Timber, however, padded over and sat on his feet. The mage wobbled, flailed, and landed on his arse in the mud. Normally, Kaelin would feel sorry for his clothes, but the mud could only make them look better. He looked up at her, robes soaked and smile unwavering. I'm Tobias Fenwick, sorcerer, mage extraordinaire, at your service, or at least that's the goal. He attempted a bow from the ground. The wind rustled his sleeves as if they were on the performance. You're extraordinarily bad at magic, that's for sure, Kaelin said. It wasn't very nice of her, but she was ready to move on. Done with the interlude. Tobias grinned, unaware or unwilling to acknowledge her insult. I'm a work in progress. I left the world of Magic Academia to develop my skills and learn real magic. Not the Academy fluff they insist on teaching you. You probably should go back. I think the fluff might suit you. Tobias just shook his head. It didn't, and then I found this. He held up a scroll. The scroll was just one of the items he found. The more interesting one was a forbidden spellbook of binding and benevolence. But he wasn't ready to talk about that. I was trying a spell to help convince people like me just a little. But things went awry rather quickly. She just stared, then blinked. Really, you tried to cast a spell that overrides consent? No wonder it went so wrong. It didn't go that badly. I wanted to find someone with protective instincts. And you showed up. It was like the spell brought you to me. Kaylin rolled her eyes. Trust me, it didn't. The scream did. Sticking me with another damn side quest. Oh, you're on a quest? I can help. You should bring me along. I can be your sidekick. I'm very good at sidekick things. The scroll glowed like it was happy. It had no right to be happy. Scrolls that orchestrate magic life bonding shenanigans should at least have the decency to sulk. This isn't a buddy adventure, Kaelin ground out. I work alone. The presence of the horse and the dog undercut her words. Tobias was intelligent enough to point that one out. He grinned. Okay, I'll try to break the spell again. There's gotta be something that'll work. He stroked his chin, pondering what words would do the trick. If he had stayed at the academy, he would have known her rescuing him twice, cemented the bonding. But he had dropped out before he got the lesson. He grabbed his wand from his pocket, hidden somewhere in his robes. Tobias flourished once, twice, thrice. Boom! A glitter bomb exploded across the clearing. Kaelin recoiled like it was acid. Nope, absolutely not. I draw the line at glitter. Oops, Tobias said brightly. Wrong incantation. His second attempt? All the rations had turned into cupcakes. Timber and Tobias each ate one. Kaelin muttered, Why couldn't it be cheese? Tobias glanced over at her. So you like cheese? What do you know? I like cheese too. He smiled so wide Kaelin thought his face might break. He was happy that they had something in common, but really, doesn't anyone like cheese? Don't try. It was too late. Tobias had already tried to break the spell again, this time turning Timber's fur into a sparkly shade of purple. It was good luck for her, not that Timber thought so. She growled. Tobias quaked. The spell wore off. He offered the dog a piece of jerky as an apology. Kaelin couldn't take another attempt at breathing for this forsaken bond, a curse she was stuck with. She gritted teeth and gave in. I guess I'm stuck with you for now, she ground out. Tobias might have clapped with joy. Sorry, I turned my back for a moment. He was looking forward to the adventure and getting to know his new companions. Kaelin allowed the mage to ride the stolen horse. She figured her clothing was more suited for walking. I shall call this magnificent steed Elwyn the Valiant. An epic name for a pretty standard horse. Elwyn sounds like the kind of horse that wears embroidered saddle blankets and recites poetry. I'm calling him Ed. Timber snorted, which either meant she agreed or she just really hated embroidered saddle blankets. Hard to say with her. But for this record, Ed got a tail wag. Adelheim the Valiant got a raised leg and a suspicious sniff. As they continued on their way, Tobias chatted. Kaelin grumbled. Timber happily accepted a jerky from the mage, tail wagging like he just solved a world peace. Tobias might even be her new favorite person, though Kaelin suspected it was just snacks. Still, it was annoying, almost as annoying as non-stop talking. She sighed and wondered how long it would take before she regretted every decision that led her to this moment. Spoiler, not long. And thus, the assassin, the mage, and the slightly judgmental dog set out towards destiny. Or more likely, another horrible side quest. Okay, we're going to take a quick break for now. I think we'll just go with one more chapter before we call it a night. Okay, and it's on to chapter 4. This is going to be our last chapter of the evening. Chapter 4: Sidekick, Unwanted, Uninvited, Unbreakable. Fate rarely asks you for an opinion, especially when assigning sidekicks. They had only been on the road for a day and a half, just 36 hours, or to put it another way, 2,160 minutes, each dragging longer than a poet reciting their own work while lighting the funeral pyre. However, for Kaylin, it felt less like a journey and more like the opening scene of Eternal Damnation. Tobias chattered incessantly. There was no other way to chatter, really, and she had ridden ahead purely for survival. Not far enough, though. His low murmur still carried on to the wind as he narrated every rock, leaf, and slightly interesting patch of dirt to Timber. Timber, the traitor she was, had chosen him over her, and Kaylin wasn't sure which betrayal stung more: the abandonment of the beef jerky. The abandonment or the beef jerky. My bad. Kaylin told herself it didn't bother her. But it did, almost as much as Tobias' ability to find personal meaning in loss. What Kaylin didn't know was that Timber was sticking close to Tobias out of spite for being left behind. Loyalty had its price, and apparently today the price was cured meat and a 3-hour commentary on lichen. If Timber had been less patient with humans, she might have bitten him already. Just a nip. Nothing fatal. It still wasn't completely out of the question. She was saving it as her secret weapon. Very useful. Should he begin another dissertation on bark textures and their importance in potion work. And honestly, I wouldn't blame her. Have you ever listened to anyone talk about tree bark? Exactly. Torture. Timber, look there. He pointed to teal flowers cascading down the cliffside. That's water mist. It's incredibly rare. Look how it tumbles down the vine, resembling a waterfall in motion. And the blue-green color? It practically shimmers. It's stunning, isn't it? Kaylin slowed despite herself. His excitement crashed through the bond between them, infectious and irritating, all at once. But you want to know what was even worse. At least to her, she felt her own interest stirring. She had always loved flowers, the stranger the better, and she'd only ever seen the water misses once before. Which was how, despite spending the last 4 hours calculating how many days she had to wait before she could ditch him without triggering some cosmic retribution, 5.5 if she was creative. She found herself easing her horse up beside him, all because she wanted to know more about a flower. It was infuriating. Numerous pontifications on various fauna and flora along the route, several contemplations of which dagger would end the nature chatter most clearly, and too many hours to count. They arrived at a crumbling toll station swarmed by clerics. Kaylin sighed. Timber groaned. Tobias gasped at the ivy-covered stonework as if it were a rare relic of architectural wonder. Someone should have told him. Nothing good ever came of running into a group of clerics. Halt! The tallest of the clerics ordered, his long robes spilling over his body like a muddy waterfall. According to the laws of passage, only those who qualify under subsection 21b of chapter 214 are permitted to cross without providing papers. Papers? Tobias blinked. I crossed this before. No one ever mentioned paperwork. Kaylin tried to push her way past the gate, only to slam into a wall that buzzed with a sanctimonious energy. Let me pass. I don't have time for bureaucratic nonsense. Timber walked up to each of the clerics, sniff, then move on. She sat next to Kaylin with the judgment of a goddess, tall, tail flicking in irritation. Not a single one of these clerics smelled of beef jerky. Let us pass, or you'll get to meet Glassfire. Kaylin ground her teeth. I promise you won't like it. Tobias held up his hand. They're just doing their job. He turned back to the clerics. Who are you, and what's the basis for your authority? The leader took a step forward and chest puff. We are the Order of Binding Contracts, guardians of paperwork, scribes of legality, champions of subsection clarity, heralds of paragraph precision, defenders of paper for proper formatting. None shall pass without filing a form of purpose. For a brief moment, Kaelin thought the cleric looked familiar. The thought disappeared as her irritation bubbled to the surface. I have your form right here. She drew one of her many blades and tapped it against her palm. A second cleric stepped forward. I'm afraid that doesn't qualify as an exception to the form of purpose. He unrolled a scroll. It hit the dirt with a thud and unrolled for yards. You must fill out this form, in triplicate. His tone was solemn as he had just pronounced a death sentence. What the clerics forgot, along with everyone else in the region, was the Order of Binding Contracts was cursed to only speak in legalese, never give direct answers, and create endless amounts of paperwork wherever they went. Tobias leaned over, examining the scroll. Look at the handwriting, immaculate. The calligraphy is truly inspiring. The flourish in the serif is absolutely sublime, but this parchment, weeping. The ink dribbled like black tears. If it's not, it will be soon. Kaelin mentally moved Tobias to the top of her dagger list. Timber yawned, walked over, circled 3 times, and laid herself down on the bottom of the third scroll. The clerics gasped as though she destroyed a holy relic. Tobias stepped towards the clerics. I'm sorry for her companion. She's impatient when it comes to paperwork. How dare you make excuses for that beast? The leader paced back and forth, polished head gleaming. It has committed an unspeakable crime, obstructing subsection legibility. Kaelin's grip tightened on the dagger. No one insulted Timber. No one. Tobias grabbed her shoulder. She shook him off, but didn't attack the clerics. It was a test of her self-control, a test no one was sure she was going to pass. The mage placed himself between her and the clerics. He really didn't want to kill anyone today. She seemed irritated enough to do so. I can't handle this, Tobias whispered before addressing the clerics. Is there another form, a shorter one perhaps, that would allow us to pass? One of the clerics chimed in. Without subsection 14H of Chapter 32 entitled Emergency Crossings. What about subsection 14H of Chapter 32 entitled Emergency Crossings? We don't know if this is an emergency, another one responded. One cleric adjusted his spectacles. We can't declare an emergency without first filing an emergency declaration addendum. It's going to be an emergency if they don't let us pass, Caitlin muttered. Timber held in solidarity or possibly out of sheer boredom. Are there any exceptions that don't require paperwork? Tobias asked. Caitlin rolled her eyes at the thought that the daggers were less sharp than Tobias's ability to miss the point flew through her mind. The collective gasp from the clerics was so dramatic it nearly summoned a thunderstorm. Instead, it summoned something worse. A paper elemental, an unholy mass of shredded contracts, stamped seals, and ink that bled like open wounds. The thing rose from the scroll pile, towering over him. Its parchment skin glowed from the fine print. Its first cry was a sound of 40 quills scratching in unison. Oh no, Tobias whispered. Sweat dripped down his temple. It's bound in subclauses. Kaelin groaned and drew mercy. Does everything you touch conjure a monster? That's unfair. Sometimes they just conjure explosions. The elemental lashed out, slapping Kaelin across the chest with a massive sheet stamped in crimson. Denied. She staggered back, spitting out paper fibers. Then came in the red tape. actual red tape. It shot like tentacles, binding her arms in regulation so tight she could practically hear the legalese squeaking. Timber bark, lunge, and shredded tape into confetti. The clerics gasped as though she desecrated their holy texts. Tobias raised his staff. Don't worry. I got this. His spell fizzled, then exploded into shimmering gold dust. The ink on the elemental turned into glitter, cascading in fabulous, sparkling tears. Really? Kalen ducked as the elemental threw a cascade of parchment like throwing stars. You made it fabulous? Accidentally, he squeaked, but also, look how it catches the light. The elemental shrieked in contract jargon, flinging notarized seals like coins at a wedding. One hit Tobias square in the forehead. It struck there, sizzling. See Appendix B. Timber, the goddess she was, waded straight into the mess, grabbed the scrolly core, and shook it violently like a chew toy. With each thrash, legal citations rained down like snow. The clerics wailed, clutching their beads of bureaucracy. Finally, a decisive snap of her jaws. Timber shredded the last binding clause. The enchantment broke. The elemental collapsed into a sad heap of bureaucratic dust. The cursed scroll shriveled, curled, and vanished with the faintest sound of a filing cabinet slamming shut. The invisible wall shimmered, then vanished. Fine, the lead cleric said, brushing glitter from his robes with deep bureaucratic resignation. We shall grant you a special dispensation to pass. Timber trotted across first, tail high, glitter clinging to her fur like she was born for the runway. Tobias followed, looking far too pleased with the outcome. Kaelin hesitated. Mercy still in her hand, she looked at the glitter, the clerics, at Tobias's proud face. Then, against all odds, she grinned. Once. Maybe. Tobias froze, wide-eyed. Did you just... Was that... Did you smile? No. Timber sneezed glitter, even she didn't... Because Timber sneezed glitter like she didn't believe it. That moment was Kaelin smiling. No, really. It was like an eclipse. Brief, strange, and likely to trigger the end of days. Alright, that is it for side quests today. I think what we'll do is we'll read 4 chapters of side quests every Monday and Wednesday, so just come in to the Wisteria Cottage for story time. Again, this is a fan read of side quests by indie author Stephanie K. Clemens, one of my favorite authors from the Pacific Northwest. You can support their work by buying their books in the link below. Definitely follow them on their socials. And also, if you love this work, highly recommend checking out their book, Monday Mornings and Enchanted Evenings. This was the book that got me hooked onto her work. And with that said, you could also check out my book, The Fangirl Diaries. And basically, this is all about anime culture in the 90s and early 2000s. What was it like being a cringy millennial in an era before streaming and social media? Read it all here in The Fangirl Diaries. All right, and with that said, thank you so much for tuning in on the live stream, tuning in on YouTube, and if you like what we do, remember to hit that like and subscribe button, and yeah, and looks like we got a message from Professor Ramses in the chat. I'm reading that next week. Well, Ramses, we look forward to listening to your read. We will definitely mention you in our newsletter, which happens every Friday. Oh yeah, I should probably link my newsletter on my chat too. And also, you should also subscribe to Stephanie's newsletter too, because she also talks about her convention adventures. She usually shows up at Pacific Northwest conventions and also at conventions such as San Diego Comic Con, which I bought this book at, and WonderCon. So definitely go tell her that I told you to say hi to her. All right, with that said, thank you so much for tuning in for a reading stream, and we will see you again at the Wisteria Cottage for the next side quest of SideQuest.